look, he's got a good open record. There's no denying that. 6th and 8th in his first 2 starts. I just wonder if it being in Scotland is just going to be too much. I know obviously he did nearly win the Scottish Open last year, but this is a whole new ball game, and we've seen him play well in majors without really ever threatening to win one, and that's not a massive surprise, right? Like he's not still, I don't think, found his peak yet. He's still learning how to win.
Mayo experience.
Mayo experience. Mayo experience. Mayo experience. Experience.
Welcome to the Pat Mayo Experience, presented by Underdog Fantasy. This is the kickoff to Open Championship Week, a preview, some narratives. We have a full smorgasbord of open content coming for you. If you are subbed to the newsletter, and even if you're not, you can go click on the newsletter right now. You can get my full research show, which is coming out on Saturday afternoon. So if you're watching this earlier and you want more open content, you can go do that right now. Just sub to the newsletter. It's completely free anyway. And then we got Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, culminating with the Cut Sweat Show live on Mayo Media Network. So make sure that you're subbed to that. Smash the like while you're here. But right now, I want to get some perspective on things. So joining me from across the pond, the host of the DP World Tour Picks and Bet Show, Tom Jacobs and Jack Humphreys, both on the line with me. Jack, the last time I saw you guys, I got so drunk I could barely stand up.
Yeah, it was a long afternoon, and watching England wasn't too good for any of us. But I'm glad you got to experience that, and I'm glad that you got to experience the England ball fest that's been Euro 2024.
So, Tom, how excited are you for the Open Championship? Like, what does it mean to you guys over there to have this major? Obviously, it's the last major of the season. I'm Canadian, so nothing really stands out to me. I love the Open because it comes on super early. I wake up super early. I make a thing of it, and I just love the different rotations of courses, the Rota. But what's the feeling like over there?
Yeah, so I think it's very kind of course dependent, right? Like I think it all comes down to the affinity people have with certain golf courses. So I went to my first Open Championship in 2014, which was at Hoylake. Went me and my friends. It was a really good time, really good week away, and having that kind of personal connection with the tournament is huge, right? So going to that, then me and my dad went to the following 4 Open Championships after that, and then went to Colin Morikawa's wing because that was only half an hour down the road from me in Kent. So in terms of just the tournament and the feeling, that is huge. Like just having that kind of affinity with a massive tournament. Other than the Open Championship, it's really been the BMW PGA at Wentworth that we've been able to go to regularly, and doesn't quite have the same feeling. You don't get the kind of PGA Tour stars over there, although you do in recent years. It hadn't been the case in the past. So we were kind of used to seeing Rory every now and then, and Shane Lowry and Tommy Fleetwood, and that was kind of all we got. Whereas once you go to the Open Championship and you can see the likes of Dustin Johnson and Bubba Watson and Ricky Fowler, all of those guys back in the day, and more recently kind of Scottie Scheffler and Colin Morikawa, it's huge. So yeah, the Open Championship means a lot for us. It's I certainly felt that Troon, which is obviously this week's venue, was the best I attended, purely because of the final round showdown between Phil and Henrik Stenson there. But yeah, great course to walk around there, and really enjoyed it.
Jack, do you find that there's a difference in how jazzed up that you get, whether it's in England or Scotland or Northern Ireland? Like, does that make a difference?
No, not for me particularly. I sort of echo Tom's thoughts on the Open Championship itself. I was actually at Royal St George's at the weekend. I popped down there and had a look. I didn't get to play it, but it looked stunning. The wind was hailing across the sea there, the ocean. So yeah, I love the Open. I'm not particularly bothered where it's played, but I do echo Tom's thoughts on Royal Troon. Troon is probably one of my more favourite Open venues.
So, Tom,
I would say,
Tom, I wanted to throw it to you. Yeah, I did the breakdown hole by hole, but what's different about Troon versus some of the other courses? Because to me, it just seems like small greens, small fairways. You can get yourself into a lot of trouble at this course.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? Is if you can avoid the trouble, avoid the pot bunkers from the fairway, then you're in great positions. You've obviously got the postage stamp, which can play short of 100 yards at times, and it's all very weather dependent, I suppose, whether that's difficult or not. You've got the railroad where you can go out of bounds there as well. They have added, I think, about 150 yards this year, which could make it potentially a little bit more beneficial to the longer hitters, but I don't think that's going to make too much of a drastic change. It's very Americanized, this golf course. I mean, if Mickelson had won here in 2016, that would have been the 7th straight American winner at Royal Troon. Obviously, we had Todd Hamilton before that. So, and when you look at the people that finished behind Mickelson and Stenson as well, you had Stricker and JB Holmes in there. So, very much a course that suits these Americans. I don't think it's one of those real true links tests, if you like, where you sort of really worrying what the weather's going to get like. But yeah, I would focus on play from the fairways and getting a little bit creative around the greens as well.
Jack, are you looking at players that, like as Tom said, with these small fairways, avoiding the trouble? We know that some of the bigger hitters are just going to take driver out of their hands unless there's a burn they can carry or they feel like they have enough carry distance to get over the pot bunkers with certain winds. But is it just going to come down to like who's hitting the most fairways and who has the best wedge game of the week?
Yeah, I mean, Open Championships, if you avoid the trouble, the pot bunkers and the thick fescue rough, then you tend to do well at Open Championships. So, yeah, I sort of echo those sort of thoughts. I actually think Rory McIlroy is going to win this year. Not someone I particularly go to a lot, but I like the way his game's rounding out, and I actually really liked what he done at the US Open. Rory normally just tends to go out there, smash the ball really high in the air. He sort of scaled that back a bit at the US Open. We saw a lot of them stinger shots from him. So I think he's sort of learning how to play golf again, really. And I really fancy Rory to win the Open Championship and get that first major in 11 years.
Yeah, did you like Rory this week, Tom?
No. I am going to stay on my Rory McIlroy pessimistic train. I think that's kind of why we're here, really, is the conflicting opinions, I guess, on Rory McIlroy. And look, I've listened to his press conference again today, and it was all about kind of he made the mental errors. He was listening or watching too much of what Bryson DeChambeau was doing. He picked out the wrong club, and then it was all kind of centered again around the rebuttal of Hank Haney making comments about Harry Diamond. And I was like, yeah, but Hank Haney wasn't the only person that made the comments about Harry Diamond. Everyone's making the same comments. And then he said, no one really celebrates what Harry does for me on the weeks where we win. And just because he's very quiet and not so vocal doesn't mean he's not doing anything. Well, I think that kind of suggests he isn't doing an awful lot if he's not very vocal. He's kind of letting you make all the decisions, which I've had this kind of debate for a long time now. Like, I think he needs that. He needs to be able to just put all the decisions on himself and not have someone interfering. And that is 90% of what makes him play brilliantly. But there is that kind of 10% where, and it's probably where it comes down to the majors, and the difference between that and winning one is that someone would have taken that club out of his hand on 15. Someone would have probably gave him an extra read on that putt. Even blamed, potentially Patrick Cantlay taking too long on 18 as to why, he got himself in his head again. So there's still those kind of mental fragilities there for me with Rory McIlroy, where if he gets to Sunday and he's 2 behind or 2 in front, I still don't feel very confident. So when he's single digits to win, I'm pretty much going to pass every time.
Jack, would you make a wager on this year's Open before you saw the weather report?
I'm not one for future bets anyway. I don't like that, and especially at the Open Championship. I want to see what the weather's going to do before I make any bets, because that's just most open venues. The defence of the golf course is the wind. So I want to see what's going to be happening up there, and Scotland has its own climate. So, yeah, I want to see what's going to be happening before I make any bets next in the coming week.
Well, it sounds like you're probably just going to bet Rory regardless. But let's say it's ideal conditions. You don't get a ton of wind, like moderate wind, nothing too crazy, not a bunch of rain, which, I mean, right now in the forecast, when I'm looking at it, it's well in advance. We're more than a week out. That Friday looks absolutely terrible, like gusts up to 30 miles per hour, rain going on, swirling winds, and they're going to make them play through it. And I guess this is the big part. I talked about this at the Scottish Open when I spoke with Tambo, Jack, that how much do you think that the weather in terms of temperature affects some of the American players? Because it does seem, I don't want to say uncharacteristically cold, but it's pretty cold. It's like 15 degrees Celsius, which is below 60 Fahrenheit. And just the most PGA guys are not used to that.
Yeah, no, it definitely has an impact on the American players a lot more. And to be honest, it has an impact on most of these European guys now because they're all based from America themselves. So, yeah, it definitely has an impact. And it's always something that I'm going to be looking at an open venue. I've been to Scotland myself. I've been up there in February. It's the coldest place I've ever been to on planet Earth. So it has its own climate, like I mentioned before. Up there, the weather can turn on a dime up there. So yeah, definitely you're gonna have to keep an eye on that this week.
Tom, what do you make of the temperature changes? Is that just me trying to find an angle, or is that a real thing?
I think it's a real thing to an extent. Like, yes, they are definitely going to be uncomfortable. I think anyone having to put hand warmers on and off to get through the early morning round will be a factor. I think the trouble with it is that we get too carried away with how much of an advantage the British players have. As Jack said, they are a lot of them based pretty much in Florida, and then the guys that are not because they're not very good. They can't make it to the PGA Tour. So I think it does come into its hand. I mean, people will just look at, like, if Shane Lowry was American, he would be double the odds and things like that. So I think, like, there is a factor where we take that too much into account. But there are certainly players that, you know, could get blown over by a gust of wind. Akshay Bhatia, for example, and I will come on to that because I think he's an interesting play. But, like, I think it's more a case of getting used to playing the conditions as opposed to the cold really affecting their play. It's, have you done it before? Do you know how to cope with it? And are you okay with dealing with a bit of wind and rain when it comes?
Well, it's funny you mentioned that the wind blowing you over. I played Cabot Links earlier this year. So the weather where I'm at is not too dissimilar from Scottish weather. And that's a Linksy style course. So it's directly on the ocean. We had gusts up to 45 miles per hour. And I did almost get blown over on 3 separate tee shots. Legitimately.
Yeah, and there's definitely more of you than there is Akshay Bhatia. So, you know, that's... look, I think it's just one of those things where it's such a mental test as opposed to anything else. Like, you're always going to get this, you know, when the temperature warms up, the ball's going to go further and things like that, and it'll be drier and etc. But it's also potentially going to play into the longer hitters' hands in the morning just because of that drop in temperature. But also, it's going to be pretty soft. We've had so much rain in the UK over the last few weeks. It's been dreadful. I mean, Pat, you got a little bit of relief when you came over here to us because that was probably the week we had a decent bit of weather. It's been horrendous since then. So yeah, I think you do factor it in, but I don't want to get carried away with let's play a 4 or 5 European stack and hope that the weather plays out that way. Yeah,
like if you had to go down, I know you're on Rory, Jack, but just in general, like, would you be favoring the American players here, knowing that the Americans outside of Stenson have really dominated at Troon?
Yeah, I sort of just tend to gravitate towards golfers that do well at Open Championships in general. Like you see the same people at the top most of the time at Open Championships. Sorry, so the likes of Tyrrell Hatton normally does well at an Open Championship. Brooks Koepka is normally up there. I think he was up there last time, actually, when the last time it was at Troon, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, I'll be looking at the Americans, the big hitters like the Brooks, but I just tend to gravitate towards guys that do well at Open Championships in general. Jordan Spieth's another one. He's a guy I'm never on, but when it comes to the Open Championship, I don't really care if he sprays it here, there, and everywhere. Somehow he just chips in from a ridiculous angle and tilts me like anything. So yeah, I'll be gravitating towards the guys that tend to do well at Open Championships in general.
Tom, you mentioned this isn't like a strict links course. I kind of felt like Renaissance Club is very much the same way. It's not as linksy as you might think, but are there other venues or tournaments that we can look at that might be able to project out some of the players that would do well, both on these surfaces and in these conditions? Like the one that I was really thinking about was the Elford Dunhill Links, but that is a pro-am. It's a rotating course, but that was the only one I could really think of.
Yeah, but I think that, like, I was thinking about this earlier before I came on here, and like I was trying to find, I love sort of correlating courses and those sort of angles, and I was trying to find a real direct link to this last year's, 2016's leaderboard, and it was tough. I mean, as you mentioned there, Dunhill Links is something to look at. People do look at it, but you've got 3 courses there on a rotation. You've got one of them that's really tough in terrible conditions. Then you've got, St Andrews that can play pretty easy at times. I did look back at the 2013 Open Championship at Muirfield just because we obviously had the reverse of Phil beating Stenson there. Zach Johnson finished 6th at Muirfield and 12th at Troon. Keegan Bradley was 15th at Muirfield, 18th at Troon. So, the trouble with that is there isn't too many players left in there that are not the obvious ones. So you had Adam Scott in tied third and Hideki in tied sixth, if we think there is going to be any crossover from that leaderboard. But yeah, to me, the thing that really caught my eye was just how well the Americans did here. I mean, you had Mickelson going blow for blow with Stenson. You had JB Holmes and Stricker in third and fourth. Bill Huss and DJ in tied ninth as well. And you even go back, Pat, this is ridiculous and not at all necessary. But you go back to the original events here, right back in the 20s and 30s, like Walter Hagen was second, and he's obviously American, and McDonald Smith was third in the first renewal. And then an American amateur who would have seen a links golf course before finished ninth in 1930. So the idea that we're going to have Europeans really come to the fore here doesn't sit particularly strongly with me, because I just think Americans are generally better, and it just means that they're fine on this golf course. I think the real factor for me, Pat, is how well players are going to prepare if they haven't come and played the Scottish Open this week.
Well, Jack, trying to think of what skills you would want. And Tom just listed off a lot of the players who finished inside the top 10 in 2016. A lot of that was weather-based and weather-influenced, and when their tee times were, and they got almost the better of the draw than a lot of guys. People forget that the cut line was +4 at the Open in 2016 at Troon. But when you have JB Holmes, Rory, Soren Kelson, Bill Haas, and Steve Stricker rounding out a top 10 along with Zach Johnson, that's kind of every particular skill set you could have.
Yeah, it is. I mean, the stuff that I'll be looking at this coming week, strokes gained par fives. I think that's quite important. That's where you're going to make your hay this week. I'll be looking at. I always look at strokes gained on approach. That's always a key stat. As Tom's already mentioned, driving accuracy. I think if you're accurate around this place, then that's a real big advantage to you. I'll be looking a bit at driving distance as well, because we've already discussed this. I believe the Bombers will succeed here a little bit more. And strokes gained around the green is sort of the main sort of stats that I'm going to be looking at this week. If you can scramble your way around an Open Championship, this is why Jordan Spieth always does so well at Open Championships, for example. You're going to be there or thereabouts come Sunday. So they're the sort of the stats I'm going to be looking at heavily this coming week.
See, I find it hard, Tom, to really separate the stats that we see on your average event. Like, when you go to Bay Hill or you go to Memorial, you know that there's no runoff areas. It's super thick rough, and you're going to have to chip out of that. Then you go to other places like Pinehurst where there is no thick rough, and you can kind of bump and run it around if you want to. Not so much in this iteration of Pinehurst because there were so many divots, and it was a bit grainier that you did have to put the ball in the air a little bit more. When it comes to open-style courses, like we've seen a lot of players with bad short games just do well, like Stenson, for example. Like Stenson has a terrible short game, and he's succeeded at Open Championships over time.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it is just, again, coming back to that kind of mental thing of, do you feel hard done by if you've got to play a bit of a weird shot around the green? Do you relish that opportunity? I think that is why Jordan Spieth has done so well in this tournament in the past. Forgetting, I don't think he's going to do it this year, but there's just people with just the right attitude. Steve Stricker has obviously got an immense short game, and that's probably why he got around the way he did, whereas I wouldn't look at JB Holmes and particularly trust him with any sort of putt. So the fact that he finished third here in 2016 is quite surprising. But I think the point you made as well, Pat, about the cut line and actually the weather is really important from the 2016 renewal, because there was such a big gap between them by the time we got to the final round. Obviously, JB Holmes was on 6 under and Stenson won at 20 under. But it was so close up until kind of the third round when they pulled away in the weather. And Mickelson was at 10, Stenson was at 9 after 36 holes, and then Keegan Bradley and Soren Kjeldsen were both at 7 under, and they stayed inside the top 6 or 8, 9 by the time the final round came. It's just they couldn't get anywhere near the guys because Mickelson and Stenson built that 5-shot gap going into the final round.
Well, Jack pointed out historical form at the Open Championship across all the venues. I'm looking at fantasynational.com right now, fantasynational.com/Mayo. Get yourself that 20% off. And I'm looking at the past 24 rounds from Opens by themselves, average strokes gained total per round. Cam Young is actually number 1 by a significant margin in his 8 rounds at the Open Championship. Then Spieth, Rory, Victor, Tommy. Those are the top 5. Morikawa, Tom Kim, Scheffler, Xander, Jason Day, Jack, are the next guys on that list.
Yeah, no, so some of the names do not surprise me. I am not on the Cam Young experience. I've had enough of that experience. I've lost way too much money over sort of last 18 months on Cam Young, so I'm definitely not on that experience. But his major record speaks for itself, and especially at Open Championships, he's done particularly well. So yeah, none of them names really sort of surprised me at the top there.
Tom, in terms of you talked about Keegan Bradley a few times. Obviously, he was named Ryder Cup captain. I haven't really talked about this on the show. I talked about it with Tambo briefly on Wednesday, but I want to hear your guys' perspective of this going up against Keegan in the Ryder Cup. I really don't think the captains actually mean all that much. They can be a detriment to you if they're bad, but most of them are just like, they're not even there.
That is exactly the point, right? Like Zach Johnson, bad as a captain. He hindered the team, but also just trying to win away in a Ryder Cup is particularly difficult. I think the fact they're willing to go with Keegan Bradley suggests they've kind of given up on trying to get the right captain. I think if Tiger Woods had taken it, they'd obviously have given it to him. But I was thinking about this before. I mean, this is ultimately the biggest let's make up for the fact we left you off the team last year thing ever, and just give him the captaincy, which seems a bit strange and over the top. I think he'll love it. I think it will push him forward to actually make the team, and then you've got a really weird dynamic as well. Europe just going steadfast with Donald again is just very easy. We've basically lost every single potential captain to LIV for the next 10 years. So that's kind of where we're at in Europe. But yeah, I don't think it makes too much of a difference. I think that I was talking about this on the show the other day, and I was thinking he's probably going to get Michael Jordan in the backroom staff at some point. He's probably going to have one of his guys from, maybe as like Brendan Steele or something like that, and helps him out. If they suddenly have a really good Friday or a Saturday, they're going to say, oh, there was this big rousing Michael Jordan, I guess, any given Sunday speech on the Friday. And it's going to be absolutely nothing to do with that. It's the fact that Americans are better than Europeans at golf. And it's in America. So, yeah, I don't think the Keegan Bradley thing matters too much. I think it's exciting from a content perspective, and there's a lot to write about and speak about for next year. It's perfect for Netflix, which I'm assuming is probably what they're actually really doing it for. But other than that, I don't think it really has too much. It's certainly not going to make my decision any different whether they win or not.
Jack, did you have any particular takes on Keegan?
No, I do echo Tom's thoughts there. I mean, I mentioned this on my show last night that my hope is just that we see a few more of these LIV guys come back onto the Ryder Cup team, like Bryson, etc. I just want to see the best American players versus the best European players. The US had to change it up. They had to try to do something different because it's clearly not worked for years and years and years, what they've been doing. So why not go with the younger guy and see what happens? But I'm with Tom. My thoughts on who's going to win do not change.
Well, you mentioned the key name. Let's start with Bryson. As we start talking about the players, Jack, you like Rory. If you like Rory, do you like Bryson?
Bryson is playing some excellent golf right now. At an Open Championship, I don't really like him. I don't think so. He does spray the ball a bit here, there, and everywhere, like he's going for that distance. But there's no doubt he's playing probably the best golf of his career right now. So I think you have to like him. But again, I want to see what happens with the weather with Bryson.
Well, Tom, it's funny when we think about Bryson, because I'm sort of on the same page as Jack, like historically in my mind, but I've made this mistake so many times this year with Bryson. Like, I never thought that he would really compete at the Masters. And he was able to compete when it was a bit softer on Thursday. And as it dried out, as the week went along, he just made some poor decisions and it cost him. But at this course, if it is a bit wetter, like you're talking about with the rain, we got bent grass greens at Troon, by the way. It's not the fescue like you normally see at a lot of the open rota courses. That, I don't know, he just played a round left-handed and played pretty well. That maybe this is just Bryson's here and he can take this.
Yeah, like I don't think I'm going to bet him just because I think I'm going to take the money from the last the USA Open and run. But for me, we didn't see him here in 2016. He didn't play. He made his first appearance the following year, missed the cut. But he did finish 8th at St Andrews a couple of years ago. I know that that's a way better course for him in terms of wide fairways and things like that. But again, just beating the same drum, that the amount of Americans that have succeeded here at Troon and doing so with, Todd Hamilton had literally like one British Open start and it was terrible. So like, I don't think we need to worry too much about it. He has got the 8th, as I said, 2 years ago. He was even 33rd the year before that down here in Kent, and he shot a fine around 65. I could see a scenario where Bryson is in the mix. Should he get on the right side of the draw? after 36 holes, and then it just depends what happens from there.
I suppose that's probably going to be the case. Again, just temper expectations with bets until we figure out what, at least closer to what the weather is going to be. And then hell, even wait for the tee times if you want to do that. But so let's just start with Scottie. So Scottie's at the very top of the list. He's 4-1 to win this tournament, Jack. Should anyone be 4-1 to win the Open? Because it does bring shorter hitters. It does bring old guys into play. It feels like you can run really good with luck at the Open. And I mean, sometimes a bit of luck is how you beat Scottie.
Yeah, you do need a bit of luck to beat Scottie. I mean, he's the best player on planet Earth right now. But I've faded him all year. It hasn't really worked. A lot of the time, it burns me a lot of the time. But I'm certainly not betting him at 4-1. And like you've already mentioned, Pat, you do need a lot of luck. You need to run hot with the luck as well at the Open Championship. So I'll continue to fade him. Will I be surprised if I see him at the top of the leaderboard on Sunday? Absolutely not. So he was T8. I think that's his best Open finish, isn't it? T8 at the 2021 Open down at Royal St George's. So, you know, his Open record's pretty good. He's made the cut every time, but yeah, it's a scary fade, but it's something I'm going to continue to do, and I'm certainly not betting him at 4-1.
Yeah, Tom, I'm like Jack. I haven't bet on Scottie all year, and it's hurting my bank account. It's hurting my depositing. I mean, the deposits are up, put it that way, because I'm not betting on Scottie to win tournaments. But I thought that Pinehurst was the perfect venue for him, and he didn't play particularly well at Pinehurst. It does seem like Troon is a fantastic course for him, especially because he's one of the few players, like Jack mentioned earlier with Rory, about keeping the ball down a little bit and having that variance in shots where he can put it really high if he needs to. He can hit those low stingers. He can hit those low wedges and get them to stop on a dime. And we know how good his short game is, that he does feel like a particularly good Open bet.
Yeah, and I think the thing with Scottie that I kind of took into account though was, so we talked about Valhalla potentially not being one where people could separate themselves so easily with just being as good as he was at the Masters, right? And he finished 8th there. Prison couldn't keep him out of finishing inside the top 10. But he then struggled at Pinehurst, and one of the comments I think he made was about how he felt uncomfortable off the tee because he wasn't sure what kind of lie he was going to get if he missed the fairway, and that's certainly going to play into his mind in the Open Championship. Now, Ted Scott has a lot of experience with dealing with that. Bubba Watson absolutely hated Open Championships because he couldn't differentiate between the fairway and the rough. So maybe he's got the experience to deal with that. And as we've already said, Scheffler's been 8th here, 5th after 54 holes 2 years ago. But he did struggle last year, you know, a little bit towards the middle round there in the British Open. And I could just see him having a top 15, top 20 finish and not really contending. But every single round, it's like, oh, Scottie's just there. He's in the mix. Like, everyone should be frightened, and those sort of comments. So I'm never going to bet him at 4-1. It's just not going to happen. But yeah, I think I can fade him again.
Well, Tom, this is where I usually rely on you and Sky for, but are there some European players that maybe are off the radar, farther down the betting list, farther down the DraftKings board, that you would give some consideration to?
Yeah, so I think we've had a recent winner in Ewan Ferguson. He's just won in Germany. He's coming into the Scottish Open this week as someone that's going to be, I think, pretty popular because of the way he's played in this course in the past. He did miss his cut in his first Open Championship last year, but he is a good player, solid player, someone that I think can rise to the occasion. So Ewan Ferguson would certainly be someone that came to the sort of forefront of my mind there. And then I think you've got some of the players that people are used to hearing, the Jordan Smiths, are going to sort of make an impact. They could be inside the top 20 or 30 there. Whether they can actually really threaten the top of the leaderboard, I'm not sure. What we do seem to get in an Open Championship is kind of like a home favourite. We obviously had Lowry in Ireland. We had Matthew Jordan last year, and he played really well at Hoylake. And I just think we might get one of these Scottish players come to the fore and you know, be the hero story, I guess. And I think Ewan Ferguson's best positioned to do that. But yeah, I think I find it so hard to see any of them actually contending because of the lack of depth we've had on the DP World Tour this season. I mean, we're quite fortunate. We've had some winners despite that. But when you look at the odds board, you've really got to come down to kind of like 150 to 1 before we start seeing some of these players. I mean, Dean Burmeister is now a LIV guy, so we can't even count him. There will be some interest, I think, in Tom McKibben. He's 175 to 1 as we're sitting here talking. if he gets in contention, all we're going to hear about is the fact that he's a new Rory McIlroy because he grew up in the same town and played at the same golf club. He has been really consistent for a long time now. So I could see him being a factor. So yeah, I think it's going to be Ewan Ferguson and Tom McKibben that would really catch my eye. If me and Sky were doing a show next week, that would be probably the people that we would talk about so far.
Jack, I'm always prone to Matthew Southgate just because I'm a fan. And he shows out at Open Championships from time to time. But do you have any back-end guys that just... Americans don't follow the DP World Tour. That's just the facts. That there may be some guys playing in Europe right now that you think that are better than maybe what their rankings are.
Hey, you shouldn't be coming to me for a DP World Tour pick. So I think my last hit there was Thomas Peters about 3 years ago. So certainly Tom is your guy for that. But I do like a European in Thomas Detry. I do sort of get sucked into the Thomas Detry experience. His last 2 Open Championships, he was T13 last year and T34 in 2022 at St Andrews. He missed the cut in 2021 on his first outing, but he's someone rounding out into a nice bit of form at the minute. And I think he's someone getting a lot of top 20 finishes at the minute. So he's someone that I like, but he's not a DP World Tour guy. He's playing on the PGA Tour most of the time. So I think Tom's your guy for the DP World Tour there, Pat.
Well, I mean, I know that you have LIV experience then, Jack. Are there any LIV guys that pop out to you?
Tyrrell Hatton, great Open history. He's someone I really like. I think he's got good links experience as well, especially at the Dunhill links. So yeah, his last few outings at the Open, he's made the cut bar 2021 when there was no wind at all. I do think the mental sort of stuff with Hatton's a bit for show, where he loses his cool and things like that. I do think he's a bit more cooler on the golf course than he lets on. So he's someone I like. I don't think you can go near John Rahm at the minute. He's not playing particularly well on LIV, and I'm still worried with this little niggling injury that he's got going on that forced him out of the US Open. But yeah, Tyrrell Hatton's probably my favourite LIV guy this week.
Yeah, I think that's going to be pretty consensus. I really like Hatton, too. He was one of the names, Tom, that really popped up throughout the course of my research show. But, I mean, Rahm was brought up. Obviously, Cam Smith. I don't know if I love Cam Smith at a place where he just might drive it into gorse bushes the entire time, but he kind of has that Spieth innate ability to get himself out of trouble, and at not a super long course, especially on the front nine here, that he can just go wedge city and make some putts, and all of a sudden he could be in contention. But for LIV guys, is there anyone that does stick out to you? Because I keep coming back to Brooks, and the more he falls down the betting board, I get that he's not playing great golf, but I think that people really do underrate his experience on these style of courses.
Yeah, I mean, look, just quickly, one more player from the Open. I'm going to lose probably money on Matteo Manacero at the Scottish Open this week. He's like, he's 850 to 1 in the exchanges over here now, and he's got 2 top 20 finishes in the Open Championship. So if we want a top 20, Matteo Manacero is there. But coming back to your question about LIV, with Koepka, I think it's one of those ones where they do completely forget that he basically honed his craft in Scotland. He was brilliant over there. He's got 4 top 10 finishes in the Open Championship. I don't think he played here in 2016. I think he actually played either side of that and finished 10th and 6th. I would argue if he's going to play well at an Open Championship, it was going to be here or St Andrews. He did miss the cut at St Andrews, which was strange. So yeah, I think Koepka could play really well. I've been suckered into Koepka a couple of times this season and not had the best experience is my slight concern. But yeah, everything points to the fact that Brooks Koepka should be really good.
Well, yeah, Brooks has.
I think that miscut was.
Oh, the miscut was what?
Sorry, Pat.
No, go ahead, Jack.
I think the miscut was due to he was going through that mental sort of state at the time. I think he just sort of signed for LIV as well, so he had all that going on at St Andrews. So I'm not overly worried about it. Before that, he was T6 and T4 at the Open Championship. He's got it's a great record at Open Championships. I don't like the putting stats at the minute with Koepka.
Yeah, we know that it can always flip, though. I mean, you put a new putter in his bag, just like Scottie, and all of a sudden, dude can putt. You mentioned the Stenson Phil finish from 2013, Tom. What about Portrush? Because when I was looking at the courses and the skills that might translate really well, Portrush really stuck out to me.
Yeah, and I think if people remember, like, JB Holmes was really in the mix there until he just fell over the way of the weekend. So that was one that kind of caught my eye. I do think it's worthwhile looking at. I mean, obviously, you know, I think that the trouble with these correlations with open venues, like I said, they're just because they rotate so often, it's so difficult, and because the changeable form and the weather, we don't know necessarily that someone that finished 41st in the 2019 Open at Portrush hasn't actually just got on a really bad, you know, weather draw. That I think is the real hardship. But if you know a player has played significantly well, when, you know, Shane Lowry and Tommy Fleetwood finished first and second, and it certainly helps my case for one of my players that would potentially come on to. I think it's worth looking at, especially when you consider JB Holmes is not someone you rely on in an Open Championship, and he's played well at both.
Well, he played kind of well at both. He played really well for 3 rounds at Portrush, and then he shot an 87 in the final round. 7 strokes worse than anyone else in the field in the second to last group with Brooks, and it completely derailed Brooks's entire Open.
And it's not like he rushed his way around to that 87 either, is it? That was always the knock on JB Holmes. I've always been a bit of a JB Holmes sympathiser, so I'm not going to come on here and knock him. I don't know why I've got into that. I think it's just when everyone piles on to one person. Historically bad that I tried to stick up for Patrick Reed at the Masters once. So maybe not the best judge of character, but I definitely think it's worth looking at. I mean, that helps the Brooks Koepka case in 4th place there. Hatton was 6th, and he was obviously inside the top 6 here as well at Troon. So, I think it's a worthwhile connection.
Jack, one more LIV guy that I wanted to talk about was Louis. We haven't seen Louis in the majors at all this season. He's having a really good year on LIV. He's won on the DP World Tour towards the end of last season in South Africa. But it just feels like Opens feel like home to him, despite the fact that he's from South Africa.
I think a lot of these South Africans, Australians, tend to do well at open venues anyway. He was T20 actually at Portrush, so if you're looking at that, Louis, so he certainly stands out there. He was T3 at the 2021 Open Championship at Royal St George's. He's playing very well on LIV at the minute. I believe he turned down an invitation. Was it to the PGA Championship?
That is correct.
That's correct. Yeah, he turned down the invitation there, so I wonder what was going on with that. But like you said, he won at the back end of last season on the DP World Tour. I think he won twice, actually. So, he's certainly playing better golf right now, but mentally, is he there? I don't know. For DraftKings, certainly worthwhile using him, but I think he'll probably get you a T30 or something like that.
Well, Tom, if we get like Louis and Burmeister at triple digits or more, like that's at least intriguing, because I know those guys can win.
Yeah, 100%. I think Louis is a good play. I think that the fact that he is playing this one and passed up his past opportunities to play the PGA Championship is certainly worth looking at. I don't know what's going on with Louis these days, and I always forget that he never actually won the Masters, so I wonder why he wasn't in that this year. But I think he's a great player. We know he's won it around St Andrews. Scottish links is a good thing for him. I think if I was hoping that Sergio Garcia was going to qualify, because I would have been like all over him like a rash, which is probably not a good position to be in with Sergio Garcia. But Louis Oosthuizen, for me, if we're looking for the long shots from LIV, I think he's potentially one. And I know that John Catlin is basically the best player in the world at the moment. I know he's not specifically LIV, but I imagine he'll get some attention as well if he carries on playing.
Well, he should. I mean, if he wins on LIV this week at Valderrama, we've all bet on him. We can just spend all of our Catlin winnings and try to double down. Again, exactly. I want to talk about some of the mid-tier names and just the names in general that do intrigue you this week. And obviously, you're going to want to do more research. You're going to want to see more. But, Tom, this terrifies me to no end. But the name that I keep coming back to is Tony Finau.
He's the first person on my list. So I am convinced he's going to win the Open Championship, which is, as you say, a terrifying prospect. The only letdown that I could figure for Tony Finau really is the fact that he hasn't played this week in Scotland. Now, when you look back at it, he doesn't ever play in Scotland the week before, and it's never harmed his chances in the past. He's got a 9th and 3rd place finish in this tournament. He was actually 18th here on his Open Championship debut. He was inside the top 6 for the first 3 rounds there. And his form feels eerily similar to what Brian Harman was doing. He's just playing well at the right time, finished 5th at the Travellers, 3rd obviously there at the US Open, where sneakily, he could have had a chance to win if he knew how badly they were going to struggle towards the end there. He has just found the form at the right time. He is a player that I think is just going to take everything into his stride. His miscut last year in his tournament was the first that he's had in, I think, 7 appearances. So for me, Tony Finau, the only reason I haven't bet him now is because the number can't get any shorter because he's not playing, unless people obviously steam into him and things like that. But he's 40-1 currently. I imagine he could go out even bigger if people just out of sight, out of mind don't bet him next week, 50-1 maybe.
That was sort of my thinking on it as well, Jack, that he could drop to 50, potentially even 60 because he's out of sight, out of mind, and no one's like clamoring to bet on Tony Finau. Are you going to be the cold water here to bring some reality to us with Finau?
No, I'm actually going to be on him myself, actually, especially if he drops down to sort of 60-1. That third place finish that Tom mentioned was actually at Portrush as well, so there's that correlation there. He's got excellent open history, so yeah, I do like Finau, but again, it's just the putter with him, isn't it? We know what it is, but like you've already mentioned, Pat, the putter can flip at any given moment. So I certainly like Finau, and I especially like him if he gets to 50 or 60-1.
Do you have any one of these other mid-range to long shot players, Jack, that you want to bring up?
I do like Robert McIntyre. I'm not entirely sure on what his odds are going to come in at because he's playing this week at the Scottish Open. He probably should have won the Scottish Open last year, except Rory hit some ridiculous shot down the last there.
Which he got a black for, by the way, which is ridiculous. But
yeah, did you see that? They spelt his name wrong on the original one. So... so they changed it for him. But yeah, again, probably Max open history made the cut every time that he's played. Again, the correlation, he was T6 at Portrush in 2019. He just tends to excel on these linked style golf courses. Obviously, born in Scotland, and he's coming off of that win at the Canadian Open. Pat. So, yeah, I think he's coming in, rounding into nice form, coming into the Open Championship into nice form. And I want to see what he does this week at the Scottish Open, though.
Here's my problem, Tom, with Bobby Mack. I feel like the price is ridiculous.
Yeah, if it, as I say, it's a little bit like the Shane Lowry thing. If his name was like Roberto Macronenzi, he's not going to be whatever price he is now. Like, he's going to be double the odds. Look, he's got a good open record. There's no denying that. 6th and 8th in his first 2 starts. I just wonder if it being in Scotland is just going to be too much. I know, obviously, he did nearly win the Scottish Open last year, but this is a whole new ball game. And we've seen him play well in majors without really ever threatening to win one. And that's not a massive surprise, right? Like, he's not still, I don't think, found his peak yet. He's still learning how to win, at the higher level as he's done the Canadian Open now. But yeah, I think for me, I would want to see more from him in Scottish Open Championships, I guess, because the 2019 was in Ireland, 2021 was here in Kent, and he's 34th for St Andrews in 2022. And you can't necessarily just say that, and put a blanket over that's what's going to happen. But he's progressively worse in Open Championships so far. So I will pour a little bit of cold water on Robert McIntyre, but that's just me and what I do, I guess.
Well, I think there's something to being the one guy that everyone is rallying around as being the hometown guy. Like, we saw this for years at the Canadian Open, like the favored Canadian. Outside of Mike Weir 1 year, has never really done well. It's like the pressure got to him. We saw it with Rory at Portrush, and that just allowed Lowry to get to the top of the board. Like, in retrospect, you're like, oh yeah, the Irish player wins in Northern Ireland. Like, it's a great story. Lowry wasn't the one everyone was rooting for coming into that week. They were rooting for Rory to win in Northern Ireland. We saw it with Tommy when they played the Open Championship at his home course. He ended up missing the cut. I do think that there's a substantial amount of pressure on Bobby Mack this week, which is why I kind of like your Ewan Ferguson call. Maybe we bet him low Scott.
Yeah, we just take the next one up, right? And I think that's potentially the way it goes, because unless Ewan Ferguson goes and plays really well again at the Scottish Open, there's going to be a temper of expectations on him. We saw Matthew Jordan really excel at the Open Championship last year with, again, low expectations on him to do well, but the story kept going all week and he managed to play up to it. And I think that's something that Ferguson can do. He's certainly found his form in the last few weeks, obviously, as I said, winning last week and being 27th and 29th before that. So, I think Ewan Ferguson will make sense.
Well, I think that actually makes a lot of sense too. Like maybe the hometown, home country narrative is better for the player that no one, like it would be nice if they played well, but no one expects them to play well.
Yeah, 100%.
So
Yeah.
Tom, who's your guy you're throwing out here?
So for the mid-range, it's another one. And, fundamentally, the problem is that they're not playing the week before. I think Patrick Cantlay, we're talking about someone with emotion and whether they're going to deal with pressure. I don't think Patrick Cantlay has emotions. So the fact that he can come into this, he was 8th in the Open Championship 2 years ago. He was 33rd last year, 12th on his debut in 2018. He's really hit that form. He didn't realize that he could win the US Open until it was too late. But he's found the form at the right time. He is going to be someone that needs to get on that right side of the draw, I think. So I would wait probably for the tee times on him. But yeah, I love the fact that he's got that 5th place finishes at the Travellers. And I think he's another candidate for sliding down the odds board when he doesn't play this week.
Jack, I can just tell you I'm out on Patrick Cantlay. I just don't want to see him win, so I don't even want to win money when he wins.
No, I agree. I put out the little meme at the US Open, Mark safe from Patrick Cantlay in the US Open. So yeah, I'm not. I'm 100% with you on that, Pat. I just can't watch him. He infuriates me watching him play. So yeah, I'm out on it as well.
Is there another player that you want to throw out, Jack?
I actually really like Ryan Fox, New Zealander, bombs it off the tee. It was Sorry, I'm just finding it here. It was T16 at Port Rush in 2019. Again, the correlation that we're going to has a decent-ish open record. We've seen him play on the DP World Tour and a lot of linked style golf courses. So he's someone that I like here. As I say, he's a bit of a bomber off the tee, and I like his odds.
I'm such a slut for betting Ryan Fox that it's kind of outrageous. So I don't know if I'm the most trusted source on this, but I really hope he wins the Scottish Open, Tom.
Yeah, I mean, if he wants to go and do that, then absolutely fine. I really like Ryan Fox. I think he's great for the game of golf. He is one of those people that everyone is going to get on board with. He's almost like been adopted, I think, in the UK. I think people forget that he's actually from New Zealand, but like I think the form has tapered off a little bit. Is a slight concern. Like he was 17th at the BMW last week. I bet him as the betting favourite, and maybe that's just the issue. I've got a little bit of Ryan Fox fatigue and been a bit let down. But he makes perfect sense. He plays good links golf, and if the added distance is a problem for anyone, then it won't affect him. So yeah, I think Ryan Fox makes some sense.
Well, Tom, Jack had mentioned
7th for the Canadian.
He was 7th at the Canadian. He's suffering from Tommy Fleetwood syndrome. He gets himself into the mix and he has a horrible Saturday. And then he just has to rally on Sunday to finish out a good result. But eventually he'll get that figured out. Maybe we'll end up seeing. Jack had mentioned, Tom, about driving distance. How I do think this could be the ace in the hole. And this is something I feel so stupid for not having done it at Pinehurst. I kind of talked myself out of it as the week went along. But if we do get some good wins, especially on these par fives, if you have to beat them up, and that's what we did see in 2004 or 2016. Like the guys that beat up the par fives were the guys who were up there at the very end. Obviously, Stenson and Phil were in a category of their own because they were just birdieing everything. But even for some of these longer holes on the back, like that play into the wind, that extra distance is going to be so valuable. So you're not hitting like hybrids or 7 woods into the green and trying to get those lower flighted shots that you can control a little bit better. That I'm just looking at the top 20 right now in driving distance coming into this event over the past 24 rounds. Bryson, Rory, Minwoo, Wyndham Clark, Rahm. Mitchell, Cam Young, Mito, Woodland, Thomas, Ryan Fox, Ludwig, Neiman, Schauffele, Kurt Kitayama, Finau, Bobby Mack, Brooks, Jordan Spieth, crazily enough, and then Taylor Moore. One of those names is super intriguing to me, Tom, and it's Kurt Kitayama.
Okay. I mean, it makes sense. Like he played, won the Scottish Open or finished second in the Scottish Open, to Xander Schauffele a couple of years ago there. I actually think you talked about kind of courses and what they mean, and you actually mentioned Bay Hill earlier, and I know that we shouldn't focus on that as a links test, but the driving factor there was huge for him. He has been inside the top 5 after round 1 of the British Open in the past. I don't know how to get too excited about Kurt Kitayama, but there is one of these things where you look at, does he profile exactly the same as someone like a JB Holmes? Yes. Like he is that level of player. He's got an experience in the Open. He's played well in Scotland. I could absolutely see a player of his caliber and category finish inside the top 10 here.
Yeah, no finish better than 60th in any Open Championship. But I always like Kitayama Jack at coastal courses, and the majority of his career wins have been on the DP World Tour, not the PGA Tour.
Yeah, no, I do like the Kitayama call. I was talking about him on my show last night, actually. But he's just a boom bust guy. He's either going to make the cut and finish in the top 10 or miss the cut. Like Tom's already mentioned, the Bay Hill thing, that was a very strong field where he won there. He beat up Rory in the end and ended up winning at Bay Hill. So you have to like that. He's got the stones to do it. He can win these tournaments. And if his odds start drifting out, he's certainly worth a bet, in my opinion.
Tom, what do you make of that, like, Victor, Ludwig, Morikawa type range of player? Like, obviously they're live to win. The betting odds will reflect that. We know what their talent is. I could see, I know that Stenson won last time, so you make the Swede to Swede comparison, but Ludwig sort of, in my mind, with the way that his game rates out, he's just basically Stenson on steroids.
Yeah, like we talked about Ludwig on the Scottish Open show, and I said I'd rather just wait for him for next week and take a chance there. I think the harder he gets, the better for him. I've never seen someone bounce back from triple bogeys the way that Ludwig Aberg does. The fact that he's making those triple bogeys is obviously a concern, but he's just got such a great attitude. And that, I guess, with all three of these guys, I think it is, again, just draw dependent. Like, if the tee times come out, that is going to be the difference between which one of those three you would bet or put in a DraftKings lineup. I was so high on Victor Hovland for this event coming into the year. I thought this was the one that he was going to win because it is such an Americanized Open Championship venue. He played so well for the most part at St Andrews. But he's been a little bit disappointing since he flashed again at the PGA Championship. And Colin Morikawa has been absolutely dreadful in Open Championships and Scottish Opens other than the one that he won. So I don't really know what to make of Morikawa. I was looking at Morikawa originally thinking I was going to bet him because I thought the number was just good. But the more I think about it, I think I would rather go Ludwig of the three.
Jack, are you surprised Jon Rahm has deeper odds than all three of those guys?
No, not at all. He's playing terribly on LIV at the minute. And, there's questions still with that injury, like I've already mentioned today. So, yeah, no, I'm not surprised that he's got bigger odds than those other three. I'm with Tom. I like Aberg the best out of the three that you've mentioned there, Pat. I think his game suits the Open Championship. And, I know he's never played in Open Championship before, but he's never played the Masters before, and he come T2 at the Masters. So, he's certainly not scared going into these events, and he's my favourite out of the three that you've mentioned there, most definitely.
Well, another name that popped up on that driving distance list, Jack, is Joaquin Niemann, who's obviously having the best run of his career right now. 0 top 10s in majors in his career in 19 starts. But what you talked about with Rory a little bit earlier and keeping that ball flight low if it gets really windy, it feels to me like the windier this gets, the more it benefits the style of play that Niemann has.
I actually don't like Niemann at the Open. I've got to admit. I know he's playing excellent golf right now, especially like on LIV. But when you come back to these full field events, the Masters PGA Championship has been middle of the pack every time. His Open record's bad. He's miscut in 2023. He was 53rd in 2022. Yeah, I just don't think his game suits this style of golf personally. So he's not for me this week.
Tom, how about you?
Well, it's interesting because I think this is the perfect major for Joaquin Niemann. The concern is that he is horrible at majors and he has not taken advantage of the fact that he's playing the best golf of his career. I mean, he had a 16th place finish in the Masters last year. That is his best finish in a major ever. The guy is 25, so I think we have to look at the fact that probably the first sort of 3 years of him playing in majors are almost irrelevant, and he did have a 23rd in that time as well. He reminds me so much of Sergio Garcia, and I don't think this is a individual take. I think a lot of people have said it, that he would make a ton of sense if he came to the fore at the Open Championship. It's just so strange that he's played so poorly in them this year. I just can't work out why he's struggling, because he is so good. And it's not as if he's just good in, good on LIV, and that doesn't mean anything. He's been good in, DP World Tour. He won in Australia late last year as well in a playoff. So to me, he makes a ton of sense. It's just the fact that if you look at it, he's not finishing inside the top 20 in majors, really. So it is tempering expectations, I guess.
Well, he tied.
Looking at the odds now, I'd rather just bet Cameron Young. And looking at the next to each other, I would rather just bet Cam Young again and just waste my money that way.
I think I will take Niemann over Cam Young if we're going to bet an outright winner. Just to take a look at Niemann, he didn't qualify for the U.S. Open. He played in the PGA Championship. He was tied for 6th tee to green. He lost 6 strokes putting that week. So he was on par tee to green with Bryson and Xander and Thomas and Victor and Scottie and all those guys. He just couldn't sink a putt. So maybe a change of putting surfaces maybe is what he needs. I don't know if I'm going to end up getting to him. I think there's LIV guys that I like a little bit better, Tom, but I just thought he was intriguing because of the distance and his ball flight. And we've just seen him play really well at harder, windier venues in the past. Olympia Fields really pops out in my mind. Not that these two courses really have that much in common, but those elements could be somewhat of the same thing. Last thing, before I let you guys get out of here. The bunkering at Troon. Some Open Championships, Tom, we see if you hit it into it, you're absolutely screwed. Other ones, it's not that big of a deal. How penal are these bunkers, both in the fairway and greenside?
Everything you read suggests that if you land in one, it's a one-shot penalty every time. I think the players are better than that than they're given credit for. I think the fairway bunkers are the tough ones. Around the greens, I think you can kind of get your way out of them and still make a score. I think if you're missing them in the fairway and you've got to play kind of full shots or play outsidewards and play the hero shot into the green, that's the problem. So I think that's where this kind of, I guess, controlled power we've got to think of. I mean, I think Stenson was like 11th in driving distance the week that he won, and he was doing it all with a 3-wood. So I think having that kind of control in the fairway is going to be the most important thing. I think we can deal with getting up and down around the greens. And that's when you talk about the kind of Spieths and the Cameron Smiths and all those types of players that will almost relish that, but you don't want them to be there. That's the issue. So very obviously avoid every bunker you can, but I think the fairway ones will be all beat.
Jack, if I am reading the tea leaves right, your team driving distance this week?
Yeah, most definitely. And obviously a bit of accuracy as well. But yeah, driving distance and strokes gained on par 5s, because that's where you're going to do your damage this week and get your score under par as such. So yeah, that's what I'm looking at most going into the Open.
All right, Tony Finau, number 1 in strokes gained par 5 in the field over the past 24 rounds. So I'm betting Finau. I'm going to lose my money that way. That's going to be a lot of fun. Although Tom Cantlay is number 3 on that list, which I found somewhat surprising. Bryson is 7th, Niemann is 8th, Rory is 9th. So a lot of the names that we've been gravitating around do beat up on these par 5s. Jack, tell everyone where they can find you.
You can find me on Twitter at JH4Media. Yeah, and you can see all my season-long tracker on Fantasy National.
All right, and I'll link all of the X accounts down in the description and podcast of this video, so everyone can find those pretty easily. Tom, no DP World Tour Picks and Bet show next week, I'm guessing, because Sky is still on his RV across America, but I know you have other stuff going on. Tell people about that and where to find you.
Yeah, so you can find me, Tom Jacobs93 on Twitter. I do the Lost for Words podcast a couple of times a week with DraftKings and with the betting with Bradley Todd there as well and Matt Vincenzi. So we'll have all those good shows out. We will still be carrying on the DP World Tour Picks and Bet shows throughout Sky's gallivanting. We'll just have different guests on. I think we're going to look at the Olympics. I think that's quite an intriguing event. So that'll be the next time that we're potentially going to do a show for that.
Tommy Fleetwood winning the Olympics. Easy game.
It's not going to be US Masters.
I was going to say it won't be the Dutch.
No, they're going. Juice got himself in. He filed an appeal.
They've pulled him back out.
Yeah, so he's. I don't know if the female player and Van Dreidel ended up getting in, but I know that Juiced is going to be on the loose in Paris for the Olympics. But that will do it on the Pat Mayo Experience. We're kicking off Open Championship week. Obviously, wall-to-wall coverage as the week goes along. If you want the secret research show, you can check that out in the Mayo Media newsletter right now. You might as well sub to it for free while you're there. You smash the like and sub to the channel and use code Mayo at Underdog Fantasy right now and get yourself a deposit bonus of up to $250. I'm Pat Mayo. Thanks for watching. See you next time.
Mayo Experience! Experience!